The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about drugs and liberalism. Now, in the province of British Columbia, on the west coast of Canada, the equivalent to California, where since 1993, liberals and New Democrats, or Democratic parties, left-leaning Democrats, have been running the province. All for a small stretch, or up until a small stretch, when it was the Liberals for just a few years. They're just as left-leaning as the New Democratic Party. Now, what was announced was the liberal-minded people, the Democrats, left-leaning, far left, if you would say, have done some studies on the overdose epidemic. It's very similar to what's happening on the west coast of America. People are dying from opioids. People are dying from drug overdose. The liberal elite, in their almighty knowledge, have decided that it would be smart to decriminalize these drugs, rather than taking a stance to say, let's stop them from coming into our country, let's have that synthetic drug stop coming from China, let's put our foot down and say no, let's stop it from coming in from Mexico, let's stop it from coming in across the border from America, let's look after our people, protect them, throw some money into law enforcement, and really crack down. No. The liberal-minded people have decided in their infinite wisdom that they'll decriminalize drugs. Now, Lenny Bruce, the famous comedian, once said that liberals have views on subjects that they're ignorant in. And no matter what policy that you look at a Democratic policy, look at any type of left-leaning social program, and you will see nothing but ignorance. Look at Canada's way to stop sex trafficking, the sex trades, is by decriminalizing it. Show me one sane woman that gets into pornography or gets into the sex trade by their own free will. Show me one and I'll show you a liar. No woman would willingly degrade her body to do that if she doesn't have past traumatic experiences. This particular article is taken from CBC, the mouthpiece of the Liberal Party of Canada, the Communist Broadcasting Corporation of Canada, the subsidized government propaganda machine. CBC.ca, the article reads, BC will decriminalize up to 2.5 grams of hard drugs. Drug users say that threshold won't decriminalize them. British Columbia is set to become the first province to decriminalize possession of small amounts of illicit drugs, but drug users, advocates, and the province's chief coroner, a New Democratic, warn the threshold of 2.5 grams set by the federal government ignores the hard realities of how people buy and use drugs in the province. Canadians 18 years of age and older will be able to possess up to a cumulative amount of 2.5 grams of opioid, cocaine, methamphetamine, and MDMA within BC as of January 31st, 2023. So January 31st, 2023, let the party begin. The province applied for an exemption under Controlled Drugs and Substances Act in November 2021 with a threshold of 4.5 grams. The federal government lowered the threshold to 2.5 grams, citing feedback from law enforcement and officials across BC. Kevin Yake, Vice President of the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users, VANDU, And a drug user of 40 years said many enhanced drug users are dependent on far more than 2.5 grams a day, and that the policy, while significant, sets them up for failure. At 4.5 grams, I thought that was low. 2.5 grams? I think that's ridiculous, he said. I need to wake up in the morning. For people with higher tolerances, it doesn't really cut it at all, he said. Yake said many users buy in bulk or with a partner to save money and minimize the number of transactions that put them at risk. Now it's a new ball game. Make sure I have enough for that day because I've got to score again. Ryan McNeil, Director of Harm Reduction Research at Yale Program in Addiction Medicine and affiliated scientist at the BC Centre of Substance Use, which is all government funded, said the threshold fails to account for many of the dynamics of drug use to Vancouver's downtown east side, where the highly toxic drug fentanyl pushes people to use higher and higher amounts. One of the dynamics of fentanyl is that it's a shorter acting opioid than heroin, so over time we see people using it at higher volumes than they would have previously, he said. There are some people who potentially might eliminate and disentangle the police from their lives, and that's important, but it's going to leave so many people behind. In that regard, it's a real policy that represents a half measure. Carolyn Bennett, Federal Minister of Health and Addiction, said the government's decision to reduce threshold for possession from 4.5 to 2.5 grams was based on input from law enforcement across the country. She said the threshold is a starting point and can be adjusted as needed. Bennett said law enforcement data revealed 85% of drug seizures are for quantities less than 2 grams, though it wasn't specified what time frame and region that data was specific to. British Columbia Association of Chief of Police said the average amount of hard drugs seized across departments varies from an average of 1.9 grams for the Vancouver and Abbotsford Police Departments to 1.6 grams for the Victoria Police Department and 1.3 grams for RCMP's North District. Some measurements factored in the weight of the drug packaging, while others do not. Vancouver Police said in a statement that it supports harm reduction measures and is waiting on the province and police services for guidance on how officers will enforce the threshold. McNeil said it's key to know how much discretion law enforcement will have and what tools they will use in determining how the threshold is applied. 2.5 grams is difficult to eyeball, so how are police necessarily going to be equipped to eyeball that in the field? Does that mean this might become a mechanism by which anything above that threshold becomes understood to be potentially possession with the intent to sell or mark someone as potentially selling drugs, he said? We need to raise questions about how this will actually be implemented in the real-world settings and whether it might perpetuate the inequities that we see in all the policing and potential incarceration of especially Indigenous people, but it also works for other folks who are racialized. Yake, the drug addict, who said Van DU will continue advocating for higher legal thresholds. She said he believes the federal government should have consulted with drug users and healthcare workers rather than law enforcement bodies from across the countries. Yake was potentially high at the time after smoking a huge bowl of meth. I see more for money for the police and more headaches and obstacles for the user, he said, while he was trying to score some smack. It's not a cure legalizing little bits of narcotics. It's got to be more than that. Having a safe supply that's tested every day before it goes out to the user, guaranteeing that person's not going to drop dead from a heavy overdose of fentanyl, which is poison. So I wonder if Yake is volunteering his services to just get high on government money and just be a taste tester for all types of fentanyl. More than 9,400 people in BC have died of intoxicated drug overdoses since the province declared a public health emergency in 2016, an average of 6 people a day. So, with 6 people a day in a province run by far-left bureaucrats, have not managed to solve the problem. that people are doing drugs and people are dying from those drugs. Their solution, in their almighty knowledge, is to say, let's just legalize it and let everyone get high and not put them in jail. We're not going to really stop people from doing drugs. So 9,400 people have died in vain. An average of 6 people per day are going to continue to die, and potentially more, because these liberals are advocating for more drugs to be consumed, but not stopping and addressing the actual problem. What's the problem? People are dying from drugs. Stop using drugs. How do you stop doing that? Stop the supply. Put them in facilities where you have to detox them. And if you don't want to be detoxed, throw them in jail. Crack down on these deaths by stopping the supply. Stop killing 6 people a day from your own crappy politics, from your own crappy ideas, because you're so ignorant on what the real problem is. People are dying from drugs. Don't give them more. This is the problem with liberals. This is the problem with liberalism and progressivism. They're idiots. Liberals can understand everything but people who don't understand them. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this edition of The Fact Is. Stay away from drugs. You have yourself a great week, and we'll see you next time on The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant.
Dan, what happens every Thursday?
That would be DCR Droids Canada Radio.
And what time is it out on Thursday?
That's from 9 till 11 p.m.
Dumb question. Where do you find it?
You find that at accessradio.ca.
And what's the best part?
It's